everyone, this is Robin from Robin's Creative Cottage. Today I'm sharing with you a really fun shaker card that I made, and this is using the Jar Basics stamp set and also the Jar Basics metal dies. Both of these are available at my craft spot. I started out with stamping my white cardstock with the jar stamp, and then I went ahead and I cut it out using my metal die. These metal dies cut these stamps out perfectly because the metal dies have a window. So I'm starting out using my C1 Copic marker, and I'm just making just light strokes on my jar, and just to give it a little bit of color. And I'm just going to go over my jar several times just to kind of keep blending that in, but it's just going to give a little bit of a shadow along the edge of my jar. I also stamped the canning jar and cut it out with the metal die, and then I'm going to use my Copic markers to give it a little bit of shading. I'm using C1 and C3. I'm using the Ornate Label metal dies, also available at my craft spot. I'm going to use the largest die to make a window in my jar. So I'll just go ahead and lay the die right down on my jar, and then what I'll do is I'll take a piece of washi tape and hold it in place. And then that way, as I'm running it through my Cuttlebug, the die will not slip. So it's a great way to just use a piece of, you can also use a piece of masking tape, anything that will just hold that die where you want it as you're cutting your image. Now that I have the window cut out, I went ahead and used my largest jar metal die to cut a piece of acetate. You could use any kind of packaging, clear packaging material, whatever you have available. I did find when I cut my acetate that what I needed to do is I needed to add some extra shims to my Cuttlebug. And also, once I cut it, it didn't cut completely through for me, but it cut enough that I was able just to be able to punch the image out of the plastic. Then I went ahead and added the plastic to the open window jar that I have. So the next step for my jar is what I need to do is I need to take something to add a little bit of height so that this can be a shaker card. And what I'm using, this is craft foam, or some people call it fun foam, and I just purchased it from the craft store. And this actually is has a sticker backing. You don't have to use the sticker backing if you don't want to. You can just use glue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding a double layer of the craft foam onto my jar, so it's a little bit thicker. And when I add the craft foam on here, I want to make my strips narrow enough so that they don't overlap on the jar. So when you turn the jar image over, you don't see the craft foam in the window. So let's go ahead and speed the process up. I'm using the Jar Full of Fall stamp set that I designed to coordinate with the Jar Basics stamp set. I'll be using the two little acorns from that set, and with my Memento Tuxedo Black ink. This ink works wonderful with Copic markers. It dries quickly, and I like to use it with my Copic markers. So the piece of cardstock that I'm using, it's not a watercolor cardstock of that sort. It's actually a natural white piece of cardstock from Stampin' Up! Not sure if they still carry this or not. I've had this cardstock for years and I love using it. It works really well with my Copic markers. The 4 colors that I'm going to be using are E31, E33, E35, and E29. And I like to go ahead and just take all the lids off of the Copic markers that I'm going to be using. I just find that it's faster to use just from switching from one color to the other. And I'm going to start out using my E31, and I'm just going to color the bottom base of the acorn. And I just do kind of a quick stroke. I'm not really completely filling it in, just adding a little bit of color to the bottom of the acorn. And then I'm going to grab my E33, and this is where I like to just do again my stroke marks. This is kind of the blending technique that I use with Copic markers, and this works well for me. And it's just kind of a flicking motion. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll come back with my E31, and then I'm just going to do a little bit more of the blending. So still the E33 right here, and this is where I pick the E31, and I'm just blending that color, just pulling that darker color into that lighter color. And that's the technique that I use as I color with the Copic markers. So again, grabbing my 2 darker colors, this is the E35. So again, just a quick little area of color onto the top of my acorn. And then I'm going to pick up my E29, and again my little flicking motions, just my quick strokes right on the edge, just to bring some of that color in. And then again I'm going to grab my E35, and this is where I'll blend the 2 colors together. Just continuing to use that flicking motion, and that is how I like to use my Copic markers, and it's just my way of blending. Once I have my acorns colored, I grab my number 0. This is the colorless blender. And what this helps to do for me is I use it in case I have a little bit of ink on the outside of my acorn. What I'm doing is I'm pushing that ink back into the acorn. So I just start on the outside of that area that I don't want and push it into the acorn. Another technique that I like to use when I color with Copics is I grab my C1 marker, and what I do with this is I like to go around the edges of my acorn just to add a little bit. Instead of my edge being completely stark white, I go around all of the edges of the acorn just to give it a little bit of a shadow. Once I have all my acorns colored, I'm going to go ahead and just cut them out by hand. This is one of the small acorns that I cut out, and what I like to do is I like to add a sequence using a glue dot onto my acorn. And the reason I do that is because the paper actually wants to stick to the plastic acetate, and so I put that on there so it will slide around my shaker card just a little bit easier. Once I pop it in there, it slides around easier. This is the Chocolate Sundae Sequins, available from my craft spot, and she has a lot of different colors over there of the sequins, and they're really fun to use. I'm just going to add them inside my shaker jar just to get a little bit more texture. This is a couple more of the acorns that I had added the sequins to, so again, so that they'll slide around the shaker card. And I did put some sequins on the back side of those little acorns also, just again so that they will slide around a little bit easier inside the jar. For the back of my shaker jar, I cut out another jar image using the metal die, and I'm going to go ahead and just use my Tombow glue to add on the back of my craft foam, and then I'll just add the backing to my shaker card. Now it's time to put our card together. Thanks for watching. For more creative ideas, visit Robin's Creative Cottage. And to order the stamps and dies used in this video, come visit my craft spot. Have a great day, everyone.